Dennis McQuail, 1972, describes audiences as temporary collectives, which can be either niche or mass in terms of the consumption of media products. They are known as temporary collectives because they only come together for a short period of time before fragmenting and returning to different activities. There has been the suggestion, specifically from Julian McDougall, 2009, that due to this and the increasing online age, it is much harder to conceive a media audience as a stable, identifiable group. During pre-production and the initial planning of my product, I constructed an initial idea mentally of the type of audience that I wanted to target. This audience was a niche audience with a fairly even gender split and a massive interest in the music scene, specifically smaller bands and artists. I also positioned the age range at 16 to 24. All along I knew the ideal channel for such a product would be Channel 4 or one of its sister channels, as these have the same target audience as my documentary. In the end, I decided the perfect channel was 4Music, as this broadcasts not only music videos, but also feature programmes, perfect for a series like this, which I believe there is a gap in the market for. Audience feedback during pre-production allowed me to make valuable decisions regarding access points to my documentary, as well as creating a more detailed storyboard and script, which I went on to use during production. This involved a number of research tasks being carried out on my target entity. Imaginary entities are something constructed by media producers prior to production, a suggestion by Yen Ang in 1991. This target entity can also be known as an invisible fiction, Hartley in 1987. These research tasks and early planning tasks help me enter into a relationship with my audience by establishing and fulfilling their needs, another suggestion by Hartley. Following my initial media pitch task, a presentation of my initial ideas presented in Web 2.0 software Prezi, I handed out a questionnaire of quantitative questions to my classmates. Within this, I incorporated my ideas for the filming style and genre of my documentary, the key concepts and agenda items that I wanted to include within the narrative, the audience entity, including gender breakdown that I wanted to target, and also budgeting figures. I took my presentation a step further than others, including research into the television industry, with the likes of viewing figures for similar programmes, and also the likely access points for a product such as mine, in order to gain feedback as to whether these access points would be successful. I also included information on the likely professional producers of such a product, for example indie brand Warp X, famous for feature-length films such as Ledonk and Scorsese, which is also captured in a cinema verite style similar to my documentary. I ended on talk of my early ancillary ideas and the access points for these products, such as music magazines like NME and The Fly, in order to gain feedback on these products as well. Questions on the questionnaire included points such as which footage would you prefer to see, with the options of mostly recording footage, mostly backstage footage, and mostly live footage, in order to get amounts out of 20, with the majority vote being the feature that I took on into my storyboard and script. On that particular question, 50% of answerers said they wanted to see mostly backstage footage, with 30% then wanting live footage and the remaining 20% wanting recording footage. Therefore, I tailored my storyboard to feature mostly backstage, with the next largest proportion being live footage and a few seconds of recording footage within my interview sequence to meet all needs. The only area for improvement I could see to make in this area would be to the answerers of my questionnaire, as they didn't all get to see my presentation before answering. This is because after class feedback I still had 5 questionnaires remaining, which I then completed using the networking site and Web 2.0 software, Facebook. I uploaded a JPEG version of the questionnaire to my page, allowing people to answer in the comments. I then transferred the answers to a physical format by completing them on one of my printed questionnaires. I gave an overview of my plans in the caption of the image, but I think the results would have been more reliable and effective if I'd shown the remainder of the answerers the presentation as well. Along with improving the quality of the feedback, I also believe in the future I could up the amount of feedback I acquired to say 30 or even 50 people, for fairer and more definite results. Following this initial feedback, I created a questionnaire made up of mostly qualitative questions. I showed 3 people from my target entity the same Prezi presentation as the class before handing them the questionnaire and filming their responses. This made up my video focus group, consisting of 2 females and a male who were able to justify their answers further by giving additional comments, which in turn helped me make more informed decisions about the documentary such as the narrative structure being in a chronological order or jumping between a few different storylines. I think again I could have improved the quality of this feedback though by adding more people to the group, at least one other male to make the gender balance fair. By having a 2-to-1 ratio of females to males, this means that more female feedback has been provided, and therefore my documentary could maybe be tailored more to meet the needs of women than men. This is something I would like to correct with future media productions. I think that my questions were tailored well to my audience because they were mostly questions about the content, what they'd like to see the most of, such as backstage live footage, in order to maintain their interest as they're the ones that are consuming the product. There are 3 stages to how audiences consume the media: primary, secondary and tertiary. These are stages suggested by the theorist Jeremy Tunstall in 1983. Primary texts include the likes of cinema and television, which grabs the audience's complete attention, while secondary texts tend to grab only half the audience's attention span, and includes texts such as print products, magazines and newspapers. Tertiary products include radio and advertising and tend to feature in the background, getting hardly any attention. My main product, the documentary, falls into the primary category, so in order to hold the audience's full attention, the content within it must be good enough to do so. My double-page spread ancillary product would fit into the secondary category, being consumed along with music or other media such as radio. My advert ancillary task drops into the tertiary category, and would grab minimum attention, but nonetheless means that I've covered all stages of consumption with my brand. Tutor feedback was especially useful in making final tweaks to my project to help it achieve as high a grade as possible from the moderator's perspective. After handing in my initial drafts of my product with my ancillary tasks, I received feedback which outlined changes that I could make to my products to make them better. My advert received 10 out of 10 straight away, whilst my double-page spread needed tweaking. Key points outlined on the tutor feedback sheet included the fact that my pull quote needed tidying or rewording so as to make it fit correctly under the columns, whilst the picture choices also needed amending as they were very much the same. There was also a question over the positioning of my caption, which I justified as it is a convention of the Guardian's Guide magazine. Additional feedback was regarding the colour scheme, as there was no synergy or cohesion between that and my advert, so I wasn't promoting the brand very well. With this in mind, I amended the layout of my pull quote, switching it from shallow popularity contest to an inane popularity contest for a better fit under the columns. I also changed the colour scheme to red, blue and yellow from green, the primary colours of my advert. I also lifted photos used on the advert with a gradient map effect onto the double page spread so as to create even more cohesion between the 2 ancillaries. The photos also show the participants in the documentary, thus creating cohesion between the main product and the ancillaries also. Not only did the feedback enable me to decipher the exact footage that I needed to capture during the principal photography of production, it also helped me to conclude that my agenda for the documentary was one that is in demand, as well as helping me to decide the smaller details, such as using on-screen captions over a voiceover to develop the narrative of the product. Following tutor feedback, I also made some changes to my main product. Feedback told me that my documentary had no narrative and appeared to be a montage rather than a documentary. The request was to put in footage that either developed the character of each member or put in an interview sequence. I went with the second option, basing it on documentary McFly Down Under, a documentary film by the band McFly, by doing some additional filming of the band talking about how they got together, their opinions on the industry, recording details to also fulfill the needs of the audience from audience feedback, and about the album launch, which features in the latter half of the clip. I managed to give it some sort of narrative. This now puts the montage into context and carries much more meaning. A smaller, easier change was amending the audio, as the soundtrack sometimes overpowered the dialogue. I changed this by creating keyframes in Adobe Premiere Pro CS3 and lowering the volume between the 2 frames, whilst upping the volume on the dialogue track. The overall comment I can give about my research in pre-production and audience feedback is that it helped me to deliver a preferred reading to my audience within my product. Theories by Hall and Parkin in the 1980s. The preferred reading in my project was that unsigned bands work much harder than reality stars who get everything handed to them on a plate. Audience feedback helped me to ensure that the audience would understand this reading, and following the production of this product I wish I had gotten more audience feedback, because I think this would have helped enhance the documentary further and be more effective in delivering my preferred reading. However, also following this project, I have learned just how important audience feedback is to media producers in order to deliver a text which is highly successful.